There are some computers and some brands which are more popular and famous in some part of the world than in others. Olivetti, for example, although it is a company known more or less everywhere, is more widespread in Italy and in Northern Europe. Triumph Adler is widespread in Germany and Italy, and Tandy Radio Shack, mostly in the States. Although Tandy was a very famous company, one of the first in the world for home computers, together with Apple and Commodore, for reasons related to its distribution, its products are very difficult to find in Europe, and when you find them, they usually cost a lot. Now, it's good to admit it right away. I have a soft spot for the all-in-one machines from the early 80s. The compact portable, my beloved IBM 5155, but more than anything else, office machines, such as the Commodore PET and the TRS-80 Model 3. These two machines are a must for me, and ironically I found locally in Rome, which is about an hour's drive from me, a Commodore PET shortly before the pandemic started, and due to the virus I was unable to pick it up, so I have to wait before I get my hands on it. Under the sheet, as you may have guessed, there is a TRS-80 Model 3. I found it in the American Facebook marketplace, and the seller gave his willingness to send it. As it was a delicate object that had to cross half the world, I asked him the courtesy of packing it correctly. And now it is here on my workbench. It is not in perfect condition, there are some scratches here and there, it is a little yellowed, it's very dirty, and as the wettest among you may have noticed, the CRT is missing. Well, I bought it with the CRT, of course, but what came to me was this. Hey, yeah, my dear seller asked me $10 more to make a good parcel, but unfortunately his piece of rotten cardboard and the plasterboard spacers, yes, you got it right, plasterboard as packaging materials, did not protect the fragile Model 3 from an intercontinental trip. Okay, I'm calm. Alas, our Model 3 didn't make it through the world unscathed. Not all is lost. Fortunately, the cathode ray tube is a simple 12-inch black and white, and I was able to find another among my spare parts. This is a green phosphor one, but it should be fine. Another detail that perhaps many of you have noticed is that there is no disk drives. There have been never on this computer. You can deduce it from this plate that held the CRT, which broke during the journey, since instead of disk drives, it says replace with Tandy disk drives. Also inside there aren't the two brackets to mount the drives and the dedicated power supply. You see, only the 32 and 64 kilobyte versions had disk drives, and this is a 16 kilobyte version. I believe that the 4 and the 60 kilobyte versions were discontinued shortly after these machines entered the market, and this theory of mine matches with the date codes I found on the chips, which indicates July 1980. This would make my Model 3 one of the very first machines, given that the date of commencement of marketing of this computer is, in fact, July 1980. I made a list of things that I want to fix before trying to turn it on this computer. Due to this great damage it has, I should deal with the aesthetic side first and then with the functional one. First of all, a nice clean. This thing is disgusting, sticky to touch, and gives off a really unpleasant smell. And this requires total disassembly. Second, the keyboard is very dirty and I don't want to stay too close to this thing. Third, the keys on the keyboard are yellowed, as well as the model and the RAM badge. Since I will completely disassemble the keyboard, I will practice retrobrite on the top of the keys. I don't know what to do with the badges. I'm afraid that they can be ruined with hydrogen peroxide. I will have to do some research first. Cleaned all the surface and reassembled the keyboard, I will glue again the plate that holds the CRT and covers the holes of the disk drive with epoxy resin. So I will turn to the power supply. In Italy we use 220 volts, so I have to find a way to change the power supply and the power cord, or I will buy an adapter. Once this is done, I will be able to reassemble the new cathode ray tube and to do the first smoke test. The road is long and I hope to not encounter unexpected events, so let's start immediately. My first attempt, as always, is with Glassex. Well, it is not Glassex, it's a sub-brand, but it will be fine anyway. Look at that. The computer came out fairly clean, however, there are still some scuff and stains. These on the side even look like rust spots. This is the inside of the upper part, and this is the circuitry for the cathode ray tube. To clean the inside, we have to remove this circuit board together with the deflection yoke and the suction cup. It looks like the flyback transformer coating is failing. I hope the wires won't break. I think I will cover it in epoxy resin. Oh, here it seems that a bracket is missing. I think I saw it in the box. And this one is broken, but I found the pieces and I can glue them. Alright. Now I would like to turn my attention to these little metal tabs. Embedded in the plastic bracket, they hold the upper part with the monitor from the lower one. They are all hideously rusty, so I'll put them in white vinegar for a few hours. On the back there are residues of adhesive tape. I'm going to peel them off with the help of a flathead screwdriver. Since this is painted plastic, I will use WD-40 instead of alcohol, cause it's kinder to painted surfaces. Okay, now let's disassemble the lower part with the keyboard, the motherboard and the power supply. There is a glass piece from the CRT. Now let's remove the knobs for CRT brightness and contrast. One is missing, but I found the pieces floating around inside the box, so I think I can glue it. Okay, now let's remove everything else. And let's clean the bottom. As As you can see from these two stickers, this computer was serviced by Radio Shack at least once, but the sticker was broken when I removed the screw, so it wasn't the only time it was opened. Considering that I haven't found any major upgrades, I think it has been opened for repair. Just out of curiosity, I would like to try this magic eraser on this mark here, which is under the computer, to see if there is a risk of taking off the paint. Well, it did the trick, although it has removed a very small layer of paint, but so little that I can afford it. The improvement is remarkable. The next step is to remove the model badge from the case. These badges are made of fairly thick aluminum, covered with a layer of transparent rubber. If they bend while they are removed, then the aluminum makes all sorts of folds that are visible from the transparent part, which by the way in my case is yellow, so it must be removed with extreme caution. I will use the blade of a cutter, which is very thin and should detach it without bending it. If I scratch the part under the badge, I don't care so much, I have to glue it again. Alright. As before, I will apply WD-40 on the glue residues, and I will help myself with the same flathead screwdriver. I don't care if I scratch the plastic as it is under the badge. Okay, this is the top of the computer. In the camera it's different, but from here it's very dirty. I will try to use the magic sponge in this area here. And in this other I want to use ethyl alcohol, which is less aggressive than isopropyl. It's not having much effect. Okay, I removed some paint without removing the stain, so no, I will go with magic eraser, definitely. Okay, now I want to tackle the keyboard situation. Frankly, I thought it was dirtier. Instead, there is a lot of corrosion in some places. This, however, is an Alps keyboard. They are quite common on early 80s computers. In order to give it a nice clean, we have to remove all the keys. On these corroded screws I want to try to put a little white vinegar, then I will leave it to act for a few hours. To clean the keys, I tried several methods over the years and this seems to be the best. Of course, I could submerge these keys in alcohol or some degreasing soap, but this seems to be more effective in a narrower time frame, as also pointed out by the 8-bit guy.
I really wanted to do retro brighting, but yeah, it's raining cats and dogs, so
Now the badges. The RAM one is almost acceptable, but that of the model has become gold and it was silver. I want to try different chemicals, because I'm afraid that hydrogen peroxide will ruin the rubber coating. If the yellow was on the outermost part, I could also sand it and then polish it. At first I want to try isopropyl alcohol. It is very aggressive on plastics and rubbers, it could work. I will test it on this small area here. But no, there are no improvements on the color. Also, the rubber is becoming sticky, a sign that it's getting ruined, so nope. There is this abrasive polishing paste for cars. Let's try it on a small area.
Let's clean her up.
And it seems that there are no changes. Finally, I will try hydrogen peroxide and leave the beige under an incandescent light bulb for a few hours, and then we will see how it went. Waiting for the sun, we can start cleaning the CRT bezel and gluing the broken pieces. I mean, look at that. Now, the general conditions are not bad, I have all the pieces, but it is very dirty, so we must absolutely clean it first. To glue the broken pieces, I will use this. This is a 2-component epoxy resin that takes hold in 5 minutes, but the piece will be fully cured in 6 hours. Let's give it a try, it's the first time I've used epoxy.
Too much.
The result is actually not so bad, it's not ideal, but it will be fine. I will take advantage of the fact that I mixed too much resin to glue the brightness knob together, which broke during the trip. Unfortunately, a piece of the knob is missing. I don't know if filling it with epoxy resin is a good idea. No, now that I did it, it doesn't seem like a good idea. I will find something else. Now we can proceed to glue some minor pieces. As for the badge, I removed the hydrogen peroxide, and as I suspected, it ruined the rubber, which swelled without bleaching. So I will leave this badge in all its yellow glory. By the way, you can buy new ones, which I will definitely try. The power supply is a classic universal Aztec. In the TRS-80 intended for export, there was a power supply that could be adapted to 220 volt by jumper, but this model was not intended for export, and so this Aztec cannot be modified to accept 220 volt, so I will have to get a transformer. Meanwhile, however, I want to remove this rifa. The big one is definitely a magic smoke generator. I don't know about these two here, but there are also filter capacitors, so they are always active when the power is on, so it's good to change them. While I was removing the big rifa, I looked at it closely and saw something I don't like. This is a 0.1 microfarad X2 class capacitor, and on one side there is a large crack and a bulge. It's not just a crack in the plastic, this is a crack in the inner lining.
I suspect that someone recently tried to turn on the computer and that the capacitor exploded as they always do, releasing a beastly smell and a lot of smoke. However, the computer was turned off immediately afterwards, because there are no black marks or damage to nearby components. I think things went like this: the seller connected the computer to the power, the capacitor exploded immediately, and he, frightened, turned off the power. For comparison, I show you an unexploded reefer. These I removed from my IBM 5155, where there were two, one that exploded and the other that didn't do it. And this is the other. The plastic is cracked, but the underlying metal is intact. So why should you retrobrite black keys? Well, because they are yellowed. I mean, not the key, but the letters or number on the surface, they are. These keys, like those on the Commodore 64s, do not have the symbol printed on the surface, but they are made of white plastic melted with the key. Now, this is only a minor thing, but I assure you that it makes a big difference in the final overall appearance of the computer. I did it on my Commodore 64s and now they are beautiful, almost new. Hydrogen peroxide will only be applied to the surface of the keys, and for this I will use a little brush to spread the cream on all the keys. The two enter keys are a different thing instead. These are completely submerged in cream. It is strange that only 3 hours ago it was raining heavily and now instead... Now I will glue the CRT bezel again in its place, and to do this I will use the epoxy resin of before. But first I'll glue these two brackets again to screw the screws of the bar that hold the bezel, and the bracket that was missing and that I found in the box. Oh, look at the keys. They are pristine. They look almost new. Then, and now. Now it's time to mount the new cathode ray tube. It should be relatively easy. Well, it's not perfect. Between the tube and the bezel there is a space that was not there before with the old tube. Yeah, now we are talking. These look 100% better. I realized now that I mounted the plate slightly out of position, about a half a millimeter below. It is very little evident, but fortunately this epoxy resin is not too strong, so if in the future I will repaint it, which is very likely, it will not be difficult to detach the bezel. It should also be added that this CRT has a decent burn-in, and that I mounted only because it was the only one that was compatible with the old tube. This will definitely have to be changed. However, the overall appearance has definitely improved. Let me put the keyboard back in place so I can close the case. Oh, excellent, beautiful. I'm very satisfied with the general appearance. I mean, compared to how it was before. It's okay. While I was reassembling everything, I ran into another problem. The contrast and brightness potentiometers were completely frozen. Spraying the oxidant worked, but only partially. The brightness has improved slightly, but the contrast has remained freeze. So I tried to force it with pliers, but I only made it worse. In fact, the potentiometer broke. Fortunately, it is a fairly standard 500K one, so it won't be difficult to find a spare. For the moment, I have blocked it at around 200K, so it should be fine. Now we can reassemble the whole computer and repair some zip ties, which supports were detached, reassemble the motherboard and reattach all the cables. And as regards the CRT, we can reassemble its circuit board, the yoke and the CRT socket. The original tube had the ground soldered directly on the CRT, so I will do the same here too. Okay, now we are in the classic 10D service position, and bypassing the original power supply with an ATX, waiting for the transformer, I can try to turn on the computer for the first time. However, the video is getting too long, so I have to stop here. But first, I have to confess one thing. I made a big, very big distraction mistake, which took me hours and hours of work and which damaged the motherboard, fortunately not irreparably. I could have edited the video so it didn't show up, but it's fair that I represent my success as well as my failures. This is a lesson for me and for those who do my kinda stuff to double check everything many times and not to be in a hurry to turn things on. You will understand what I am talking about in the part 2 of this video. Thanks for watching until the end, stay tuned for part 2 and see ya next time!